Most people spend $200, $300, sometimes even $400 trying to start a backyard garden. And by the end of the season, they've grown maybe $30 worth of food, a few tomatoes, some lettuce that bolted too fast, and a lot of frustration. So they stop, and they go back to the grocery store. That's not a gardening problem. That's a strategy problem. What if $100, spent the right way, could produce food in your backyard for the next 10, 15, even 20 years? Not on a big farm. Not on some rural homestead. Just a regular backyard, in a regular neighborhood, with one smart decision made at the beginning that most people never think about. That's exactly what this video covers. Almost everyone makes the same mistake. When most people decide to start growing food, they go straight to the garden center, grab a flat of annual seedlings, tomatoes, peppers, squash, maybe pick up a bag of fertilizer, some potting mix, and a few tools they don't really need. They spend $150, $200 without blinking. And those plants, they produce for one season. Then they're done. You have to start over next year, and the year after, and the year after that. It's like renting instead of buying. You're paying over and over again for the same thing, and you never actually own anything. The smarter approach is to think about your garden the way you'd think about an investment. Not what does this produce this summer, but what does this produce over the next decade? There's a concept I like to call return on garden, not return on investment, return on garden. The idea is simple. Every dollar you spend in your backyard should be measured by how many years it keeps producing. And when you start thinking that way, the math gets really interesting. Here's how $100 spent the right way actually looks. $30 goes toward a young fruit tree, a dwarf apple, a peach, a fig, depending on your climate. A tree that size costs around $25 to $35 at most nurseries or online. And here's what that means for your return on garden. A healthy fruit tree, once established, can produce fruit for 20, 30, sometimes 50 years. You plant it once, you never buy it again. That single $30 purchase could still be feeding your family long after your kids have grown up and moved out. If you don't have space for a tree, or you're working with a patio or a small yard, a dwarf variety in a large container works surprisingly well. The yield is smaller, but the principle is exactly the same. You plant once, you harvest for years. Next, $30 goes toward berry bushes, blueberries, blackberries, or raspberries, or a mix if you can find small starts. Blueberries especially are worth understanding. A single blueberry bush can live and produce fruit for 20 years or more. And once it's established, it's not asking much from you. A little acidic soil, decent sunlight, and it just keeps going season after season. Blackberries and raspberries spread on their own over time, which means one plant this year becomes 3 or 4 plants by year 3. You're not buying more. The garden is multiplying itself. Next, $15 goes toward perennial herbs, the most underestimated line item on this list. Perennial herbs, things like thyme, oregano, chives, sage, lemon balm, come back every single year without replanting. You put them in the ground once, and they just keep growing. Some of them spread, some of them reseed themselves, and at the grocery store, a small bundle of fresh herbs runs $2, $3, $4 every time. When you grow your own perennials, that cost drops to zero permanently. $10 goes towards seeds. But here's where you have to be selective. The crops worth putting those $10 into are the ones that either produce heavily, store well, or give you seeds back at the end of the season. Garlic is one of the best examples. You plant a clove, you harvest a full bulb. You save a few bulbs, you plant more next year. Sweet potatoes work the same way. Save some slips from this year's harvest, grow more next season. These crops are essentially self-renewing if you handle them right. And the last $15 goes toward compost or a basic soil starter. This is the foundation that holds everything else together. You can have the best plants in the world and still struggle if your soil is poor. A single bag of quality compost mixed into your planting area does more in year 1 than any synthetic fertilizer. And after that first investment, you start building your own compost from kitchen scraps and yard waste, which is essentially free soil fertility for every year that follows. So let's add that up. 30 for the fruit tree, 30 for the berry bushes, 15 for the perennial herbs, 10 for seeds, 15 for compost. That's exactly $100. And the difference this creates is not small. This is the difference between restarting your garden every year and building something that keeps producing without you having to start over. So the real question becomes, are you planting for this summer, or are you planting for the next 10 years? There's a second mistake most people make. They want results fast, so they skip the plants that take longer to establish. That's the wrong move. Asparagus and rhubarb are two of the most valuable things you can put in a backyard garden, and almost nobody plants them because of patience. Asparagus takes 2 to 3 years before the first real harvest. Most people give up on it for exactly that reason. But once it's established, an asparagus bed can produce for 20 years or more. You do the work once, the plant does the rest. Same with rhubarb. Plant it once, divide it every few years, and it keeps giving you stalks every spring without asking for anything in return. If you can work either of these into your $100 budget, even by scaling back somewhere else, do it. Because the plants that require the most patience are almost always the ones that pay back the most over time. I remember when I first started thinking about gardening this way. I'd been replanting the same annuals every year, spending money at the start of every season and wondering why it never felt like I was getting ahead. It wasn't until I came back to my first blueberry bushes 2 years later, picking fruit without spending a single extra dollar, that the whole thing clicked. This isn't just a hobby. This is a food system. And food systems are built to last. The grocery store doesn't want you thinking this way. Every time you go back for herbs, for fruit, for fresh produce, that's a transaction. A perennial garden removes dozens of those transactions permanently. Over 5 years, a $100 backyard garden built on perennials and long-producing crops can easily return $800, $1,000, or more in food you're no longer buying. That's just how compounding works, in finance and in gardens. If you want a step-by-step plan, what to plant, where to put it, how to sequence things across the first few seasons, there's a resource for that. It's called the Backyard Miracle Farm System. The link is in the pinned comment. $100 spent on annuals buys you one season. $100 spent on perennials and long-producing crops buys you years of real food security. The difference isn't the money, it's the mindset. Your backyard doesn't have to be a hobby. It can be a food system, one that gets stronger every year. Asks less from you over time and quietly reduces how much you depend on the grocery store, season after season, year after year. You don't need a farm, you don't need acres. You need the right plants, decent soil, and the patience to let it build. Before you go, I want to hear from you. If you had $100 to spend on your backyard right now, what would be the first thing you'd plant? Drop it in the comments, and if you're working with a small space or a short growing season, tell me where you are, because there's almost always a version of this that works for your situation too. If this video helped you think about your backyard differently, give it a like. It helps this channel reach more people who are trying to build the same kind of food independence. And if you want to see more practical ways to grow food at home and depend a little less on the grocery store, subscribe. There's a lot more coming.